C major scale. The summer of 24, not so long ago, England lost the final of the Euros. England football team lost the final of the Euros to Spain. Seemingly inevitable result. We are a nation that permanently seems to sort of teeter on the edge of glory. And in a rather predictable script, we bowed out at the end. I still don't know what we'd do as a nation if we were ever to win one of these tournaments. I think we'd either the country would be rampaged by football vandalism or everyone hugging each other like hippies at Woodstock. Time will tell, maybe, perhaps. But one thing the England football team did do exceptionally well, which they haven't done in previous tournaments, is execute a penalty shootout. I think it was against Switzerland. It was a blemish-free 5 penalties, which took them through to the quarter-finals, I think it was. So it was obviously something they've been working on. I have a very dear friend of mine who keeps me fit, keeps my body in trim, because without him, I think with all this sort of crunching around I do as a piano player, I think I'd have a quite limited shelf life. He takes his job very seriously. He did a master's in his chosen field, and one of the modules he did was study penalty taking. And I learnt a lot from him as to the psychology of taking a penalty, the do's and don'ts, what's possible and what's not. There were a few quite remarkable facts I found out. First one being that if you take a penalty correctly and you drill it into the top corner at the right speed, there is nothing a goalkeeper can do about it. Nothing at all. But it's not scientifically, geometrically possible to reach in that top corner if the penalty taker executes it correctly. The second one is that goalkeepers don't look at penalty takers' eyes, they look at their hips, which was a revelation to me. It did beg the question, well, if they know this and they've discovered this fact, then why don't they just change and look at their eyes? But it seems, so when I watch the penalty takers taking their penalties, I think, well, you can put your eyes where you like, really, because apparently, according to this study, they don't look at their eyes. But there are also things which are just insurpassable in terms of data and information, things that you cannot get past and beyond in the science of penalty taking, and that is emulating the environment and the pressure and the stress of taking a penalty in an international tournament, a televised international tournament in front of tens of thousands of people. You cannot emulate that stress. No matter how hard people try, coaches try to, they sometimes come up with a fine system for missing, or so there's the threat of losing money, or distraction techniques. They never manage to emulate exactly what it's like. So what can they do? All they can do is practice the best of their ability and hope that they can deal with this stress. I often have little sports talks with Rex and Evan from the trio, and I talk about we talk about the sports and the similarities between sport and music. And we had a little discussion recently as to how would you emulate that pressure? What is the most simple task that you would be expected to do as a professional musician, blemish-free, time and time again? And I guess it would be, for me, a C major scale. So I did that blemish-free. So if I'm able to do that blemish-free, how could I emulate a scenario where I was put off and distracted so badly that I would screw that up? We laughed at the idea that maybe if you gave the auditorium full of audience all little mini xylophones and got them to play D-flat major, a semitone up at a different tempo, would that put you off? Is that something you could emulate? Just do a self-contained version of that, where you play C major in the right hand and play D-flat in the left hand at a different tempo, something like this. Let's see if I can achieve it. So here's the C major, and here's the D-flat on top of it. Certainly it twists my brain, but I don't think it necessarily emulates the pressure and stress I can feel, because this leads on to what it's like to be a performer. Sometimes I can find I'm in a scenario where the inner voice. Now, the inner voice of music, this has been written about several times. I think there have been quite a few books written upon this subject. There is this little gremlin that lives inside your head that insists that you are about to fail. And this little creature has a tendency to turn up just at the point when you're about to play something very, very difficult. Happens to me countless times. Just as you're about to play a difficult passage, maybe it's got a 2-octave stretch. Oh, that was a 2-octave stretch I wanted to achieve, and I achieved it without thinking. Interesting. But if I had to do that in a concert scenario, just before I was about to do it, the gremlin, the little demon inside, would say, "You're never going to do that. I don't know why you're bothering. You're a failure." And then in the conversation, the inner conversation, you'd get confused. Your brain wouldn't work, and you'd fluff it. You'd likely fluff it if you let that inner voice get the better of you. Also, that inner voice can get in the way when you're trying to improvise or create. Happens a lot in the band. If we get very nervous sometimes before our performances because they're quite hard to execute. The music that we play is quite hard to execute. Sometimes I get very nervous. We all get very nervous, and once you're nervous and you're tense, your creative brain, your musical brain, isn't acting to the best of its ability, and you're closing off a whole lot of avenues of tools that you can use to silence that inner doubt or to become a more musical version of yourself. So there are two techniques, there are two approaches or two things that you need to do in order to circumnavigate that voice and to silence it. The first one would be to practice, which is the tedious method. No one wants to practice, least of all me. I'm inherently lazy. And I don't want to do that. I want to do as little work as possible and for it to be as natural as possible. But I'm afraid you cannot be as natural as possible and deal with those moments without a lot of practicing those passages, akin to the penalty take, practicing those kicks time and time again. All right, you can't emulate the environment that you're going to be in, but you at least can give yourself a core foundation and a fundament and a muscular structure, a brain structure to approach those difficult passages. The other technique is the other thing which you must do, and you must try and trick yourself into, is listening to what's going on around you. This is the hardest thing to do, actually, because when you're in a panic mode, there's so much going on, there's so many voices, there's so many doubts. You don't listen to what's going on around you. It reminds me of the adage or the guidance I got when I was a very young musician, just starting out, and someone much wiser than myself said to me, there are 3 stages to learning your instrument. The first one is learning it, and being impossible to listen to while you do that. All the clumsy early mistakes and the learning of the notes, and also that what's that tune that people used to incessantly play at me when they were learning the instrument? The one that I don't know the name of. It goes. That one. Yeah, that tune epitomises for me that stage. Like I say, I don't know what that's called, but it's that point when you're just finding your way in the instrument. The second stage, which is all too common, is where you play the hell out of it, and this happens a lot when you're playing with other people. You just swamp everyone with all the things that you can do. You're so thrilled that you can play all these notes and play these licks that you just play the hell out of it, and you're not listening to anyone. You're playing over everyone, and probably their ears are quite fatigued by the sound you're producing. And the third stage is just simply called the stage where you stop and listen and realise that you can play space. You can leave space, and that's the point when you use the tone of the instrument to your advantage, and you can play much less because you have a certain ability and a capacity with the instrument, and you have a certain harmonic language. Where playing less means a lot more. And immediately as I play that stuff, my headspace, I can feel my head relax, and I'm listening to the room, I'm listening to the way that the sound bounces off the walls in my living room here. I'm using the acoustics. And if you're in a beautiful venue, you know, a concert hall or something like that, or any venue, you can, and people are listening, you can use the whole room as your sound chamber. So to link back to our penalty takers, I think it's safe to say that practice is never enough. And finding the right headspace is never enough, because you never quite know how you're going to deal with that moment. But there is a third secret element which we employ within my band, the trio, Neil Cowley trio, and that is what we call the Larry element. A Larry is a word that we use to describe someone who's a complete idiot and a fool, and that's how we would describe ourselves. We've been accused of being irreverent about our music when we play it, because we do have the capacity. I think our music does have the capacity to push people to tears. And then in the next breath we can be... which sums us up, really. We're quite a schizophrenic bunch. But don't be fooled by that. Actually, what's happening is we're trying to trip up that inner demon. We're trying to circumnavigate that voice that's intent on putting us off. And we do that with laughter, because laughter and irreverence is such a great way of getting around that horrible little gremlin that would try and drag you down and try and convince you that you can't do what you're trying to do. So we laugh at him, and that gets us through. So bear with us while we laugh. We will eventually make you cry as well.